Hifiman has a lot of products of varying quality. The problem with them is their quality control. Despite their many years of experience making audio products, Hifiman continues to have some of the most inconsistent build quality of any manufacturer. Which is precisely why I grimaced when I read that Hifiman had released the Deva, a unique take on a $300 planar magnetic headphone made mostly of plastic. The Deva has been around for only a few months, and in the middle of the global pandemic, has not received a whole lot of attention. I purchased the Hifiman Deva with its optional Blue Mini Bluetooth module. I paid the full price of this combo, which comes to about $290. The Deva without the Bluetooth module is approximately $220. And you know what? The build could be better, but the sound, functionality, and overall features are pretty darn great. Let's talk about the new Hifiman Deva and my initial impressions. The Deva has a few tricks up its sleeves, depending on whether you pay for the Blue Mini or not. Without the Bluetooth module, you get only the 3.5mm cable in the box. The Bluetooth module is an external device that is specifically designed for the Deva. There are a few things that make using the Blue Mini with other devices unlikely. First, the Blue Mini has a balanced 3.5mm male jack for the Deva's 3.5mm female port. Second, the curvature of the Blue Mini and the protruding plastic cover means you'll have a hard time finding other headphones to attach the device to. The Blue Mini doesn't need to be connected to the Deva to work. In fact, you can turn the module on and off when it's not plugged into the Deva. I want to highlight two separate things about the Deva. The first is in regards to the headphones themselves, whether or not you buy the Bluetooth module, and the second is directly in relation to the module. The Deva has only one 3.5mm headphone cable port. Typically, this means you cannot make headphones balanced because the modification is too costly or frankly impractical. But Hifiman created a workaround. The Deva is already balanced. You see, the 3.5mm port is a balanced 3.5mm jack. If you look at the stock cable, you will notice that one of the male 3.5mm ends has 3 rings on the tips. That's the balanced side that goes into the headphones. The other end of the cable is a standard 2-ring termination. This means you can in fact buy a 3.5mm single balanced cable that terminates in XLR or 4.4 or 2.5mm or whatever else you want. The downside to this is having to pay for yet another special cable that can be used with only one headphone. And are there balanced cables readily available for the Deva? Well, not from Hifiman. Leave it to them to not capitalize on a golden opportunity. You might be able to find something on eBay, but chances are you'll be ordering from China. In the alternative, you can head to Heart Audio Cables. I spoke to James Alvarado at Heart and asked if he has a cable for the Deva. He said he has the prototype, which I purchased from him. And I'm happy to say that the Heart cable works perfectly. The Heart Audio Kit system works with the Deva cable that Heart sent me. Now, let's talk briefly about the Blue Mini features. The Blue Mini is first a Bluetooth DAC amp. What I was truly surprised to find is that Hifiman included all major codecs, including LDAC, and much applause for that. I was further surprised by the sheer amplification the Blue Mini provides over Bluetooth. It's louder than most Bluetooth headphones I've ever heard. Compared to wired connection, it's obvious that the Blue Mini still is not able to drive the headphones at peak performance, but it comes close, and that's quite an achievement if you ask me. The Blue Mini also functions as a USB headphone. That is, you can plug the provided USB-C to USB-A cable into the Blue Mini and your PC, Mac, or phone, and the headphones will get power for the source device. It's a seamless operation. I did not need to download any drivers, and it is simply plug and play. But there is a problem, and for once, it's only partially Hifiman's fault. Connecting the Blue Mini is a little frustrating. It's not as simple as it should be. You have to turn on the Blue Mini, then double tap the power button to start the pairing process. Sometimes you won't be fast enough and you'll have to turn off the headphone and start all over again. If you have one source paired to the Blue Mini, you will need to either turn off Bluetooth on that source or forget the Blue Mini on that source so that you can pair to another source. Pairing on my iPhone X was simple. Of course, you are limited to SBC and AAC if you use Apple devices, so no love here towards Apple's pig-headedness. Connecting to Android was a little frustrating at first. I tried pairing on my LG V30, and even though the headphones paired fine, the audio stuttered. I used the Hifi app for the Bluetooth connection, and the audio either refused to play or played and stuttered constantly. I switched to the Fio Music app and had the same experience. I also tried Amazon Music HD and again was met with the same result. I updated the Blue Mini's firmware. There was also a very large Android update of about 190 megabytes that was sitting on my V30, and I decided I should install that as well. Once the phone was updated, I paired the Blue Mini again, and this time the audio played perfectly through the Fio Music app and the Amazon Music HD app. I was able to receive LDAC. However, the Hifi app still stuttered. It sent out maximum volume and stuttered over and over again. I updated this app to its most recent version, and that did not fix the problem. I then tried Bluetooth connection on the Hifi R3 Pro. After, of course, I updated the R3 Pro to its most recent firmware. Yet, I hit the same problem. I tried the Blue Mini with the Sony NW-ZX507, Hifi R5, and Astral & Kern SA700. The Sony and R5 have Android OS and work perfectly with the Blue Mini. All current Astral & Kern DAPs use a heavily customized Android OS. There was no problem whatsoever connecting the SA700 to the Blue Mini. I cannot fault the Blue Mini with the way it performed on the R3 Pro or the Hifi Android app on the V30. This seems to be a rather unique bug with either the Hifi app or my hardware, and I don't know which is the case. The Blue Mini otherwise connected just fine with my PC, Mac, iPhone, and other devices. The Deva is a very interesting headphone. For about $200 without the Bluetooth module, you get a pair of headphones that sounds rather clean, clear, and have wide soundstage. It is a testament to what can be achieved for little money. To test the wired sound quality, I plugged the Deva into various sources, including the Hifi R3 Pro, the Hifi R5, LG V30, Astral & Kern SA700, and the Monolith Liquid Spark with the Shit Modi stack. I used both my FLAC library and Amazon Music HD. In order to give you the most information, I decided to compare the Deva against the Sundara and the audeze LCD-1. I have previously reviewed both of these headphones, and if you want to know how they sound, please watch their respective reviews. When comparing headphones, I used an A/B switch. All headphones were heard using their stock cables and single-ended connection, and of course, I volume matched to the best of my ability. The Deva's bass is clean and clear, with good separation of sub-bass and mid-bass. Part of the reason is because there is not much sub-bass emphasis. You can hear rumble in songs like Mountains by Hans Zimmer, but it is nothing like dynamic driver performance. The sub-bass rumble is fast and not particularly accurate in that very specific respect. For example, in Mountains, when the crescendo hits, there is supposed to be an organ that cuts through the mix with several other instruments in the background and a deep, rolling thunder in the bottom layer of the song. The Deva does recreate all of these elements, but keeps the sub-bass presence of the organ suppressed in comparison. The organ does not distort and does not drown out mids. The rolling thunder sound has fast transients and does not linger. Mid-bass is also somewhat tame. You will not hear mid-bass slam like you might on the One More Triple Driver or the Sivka Phoenix. The mid-bass is nearly as fast as the sub-bass. Hip-hop songs lose some of their characteristic bass thump on the Deva. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the Deva rolls off the bass. It does not. It's merely that the bass is not particularly emphasized. In songs like Angel by Massive Attack, you can truly appreciate the Deva's more controlled bass response. You see, Angel has lots of layers of bass with a deep rumble that is just overblown. This is a bass head's song, and if you are not into this type of music, your head will start hurting within moments. That is how I feel whenever I listen to this song. But on the Deva, that overemphasized, overmodulated, overblown, overdone, unrealistically saturated bass sounded rather, well, controlled. I could hear the rumble, I could hear the vocals, I could hear the various other bass instruments, and my head did not hurt. The Sundara's sub-bass is less present than that of the Deva. I hear a few decibel difference. The transient sounds about the same, that is, both headphones have fast sub-bass and quick decay. But there is just a tiny bit more bass emphasis on the Deva. In Mountains by Hans Zimmer, the sub-bass rumble was just a bit more recessed on the Sundara. The crescendo sounded a little bit more clear on the Sundara as well, and this is because the organ had a few decibels less emphasis than it did on the Deva. The rolling thunder effect was more obvious on the Deva. Mid-bass and sub-bass meld more on the Sundara than on the Deva, but it's by a small margin. In hip-hop songs, the mid-bass tends to have the same amount of slam as a Deva, and there really is very little difference here. The most obvious thing, comparatively, is the sub-bass and mid-bass separation, where the Deva has just a tiny bit more of it. The experience with Angel by Massive Attack was similar to my previous impressions with the Deva. The Sundara tends to meld the sub-bass and mid-bass just a fraction more than the Deva does. Mid-bass slam is marginally more emphasized on the Deva. In many respects, these two headphones have similar bass response. Neither is bassy, and both do a fairly good job in providing bass clarity. The slight differences I heard on the Deva are, as I said, well, slight. You can clearly tell that the Deva and Sundara share a common tuning for bass. The LCD-1 does not have clear bass, generally speaking. Nevertheless, in Mountains, the LCD-1 did let me hear the rumble at the beginning of the song. It was fast and lacked some detail, but was represented. Clarity was the biggest issue. The Deva has it, and the LCD-1 simply does not. That sub-bass rumble was just too muddy and lacked detail on the LCD-1, where it had both clarity and detail on the Deva. When the crescendo hits in Mountains, the LCD-1 simply distorts the organ, and the layers of other instruments in the mix kinda just get lost. Hip-hop songs lose their bass emphasis on the LCD-1. There is supposed to be a mid-bass slam, but the LCD-1 ends up melding sub-bass and mid-bass and just provides a somewhat sloppy, undetailed, unrefined bass. Neither the LCD-1 nor the Deva is a bassy headphone. They are similar in the sense that they both will keep sub-bass close to neutral, but not truly there. The LCD-1's sub-bass isn't too far off from the Deva's. It's simply a few decibels less emphasized. The biggest issue, again, is the clarity. Going back and forth, you can immediately tell that the LCD-1 is a darker headphone, one which squishes details together. Mids on the Deva sound very clear. There is excellent separation between bass and mids. Hip-hop songs present vocals about 2 steps ahead of the mix. The Deva presents all the vocal sparkle you would expect from this genre of songs. Nothing sounds harsh or distorted. Orla Gartlett's song Why Am I Like This is a good example of the sibilance that the Deva brings forward. Orla has natural sibilance that is recorded into the song. The Deva does not roll that off. Orla's sibilance is clearly audible. It is not harsh or fatiguing, but if you have never heard sibilance before any particular song, it might be a little jarring. Orla's voice also has some grain, but the Deva smooths that out considerably. What you end up getting is a very smooth tonality, but for the artist's natural sibilance. In Want You Back by Haim, the primary vocalist also has natural sibilance. The Deva did not overemphasize this. There are 2 backup vocalists in the song as well, and both are easily audible with their individual tonalities. When the entire mix plays along with all 3 vocalists, the backup vocalists meld slightly, but if you pay close attention, you can still hear their separate voices. Male vocals sound smooth and clear as well. In Superposition by Young the Giant, the primary vocalist sounds about 2 steps ahead of the mix. His voice displays no grain or harshness. There is no sibilance. Acoustic guitars have very quick transients, which is not quite accurate. The thick guitar plucking, where the notes reverberate and sound thick, is not what you hear on the Deva. Instead, you get a more clinical approach to acoustic guitars. This is also true for bass guitars, which tend to have faster decay than they should in reality. One very positive aspect is that the Deva does not have a shouty nature. Vocals do not sound in your face and do not have any unnatural 1 kHz boost. Some headphones, like the Vocal Erupt, sound tinny. The Deva does not. Vocals tend to have natural decay, and if there are multiple vocalists, you can usually pick them out of the mix. The Sundara's mids sound a little different from the Deva. There are a few notable differences. In Why Am I Like This, Orla's sibilance is rolled off on the Sundara, whereas it is represented in its full glory on the Deva. The Sundara also shows just a bit of the grain in Orla's voice, where the Deva made Orla sound quite smooth. Separation of multiple vocalists is just a tiny bit better on the Deva than on the Sundara. In Want You Back, I could hear the two backup vocalists with their individual tonalities when I listened on the Sundara, but as soon as the rest of the mix started to play, the backup vocalists melded. To be honest, they melded a little on the Deva too, but I could still hear the different tonalities upon close attention on the Deva. Male vocalists do not sound quite as smooth on the Sundara as they do on the Deva. There is just a hint of graininess to the Sundara that the Deva simply does not convey. That additional grain in the Sundara does not distort or make the vocals sound unnatural. In fact, you could argue that the Sundara's presentation is the more neutral of the two in this regard. Acoustic guitars have slightly longer reverberation on the Sundara. They sound more full than they do on the Deva. It's not a huge difference, but noticeable when you do an A and B test. In fact, the Sundara's rendition of acoustic and bass guitar seems to be slightly more accurate because of the longer decay and thicker presentation overall. The differences between the Sundara and Deva's mids is more obvious than the difference between bass response. Yet the two headphones are not worlds apart. You can hear there is a house sound, just slightly different approaches. Neither is better than the other, just simply a little different. As you would expect, the LCD-1 has darker sound in the mids than the Deva. Vocals sound about 2 steps ahead of the mix in most songs. Orla Gartland's natural sibilance is definitely rolled off compared to the Deva. This prevents her voice from getting harsh or fatiguing, but it's not particularly accurate. The grain in her voice, which was present on the Sundara, is not present on the LCD-1. In fact, the smoothness in the vocals is rather similar between the LCD-1 and the Deva. In Want You Back, the primary vocalist's sibilance is again missing on the LCD-1. The backup vocalists meld significantly compared to the Deva. Initially in the song, you can hear the two backup vocalists, but when more than 2 instruments are playing, those same vocalists sound like one. And when the entire mix is playing, the backup vocalists meld together, and it is very difficult to tell them apart. Male vocalists sound fairly smooth on the LCD-1, similar to the Deva. There is no harshness in either headphone. The big difference here is in the presentation, that is, the LCD-1 makes male vocals sound thicker, fuller, a little more forward than they sound on the Deva. You do not hear more detail in the vocals with the LCD-1, you just hear more of the vocal. In comparison, the Deva sounds a little bit more analytical, or perhaps maybe more neutral. Acoustic and bass guitars have longer decay on the LCD-1 than on the Deva. Those instruments do not have more detail on the LCD-1, but they do sound more full. The Deva does a fantastic job with treble extension and energy without becoming harsh or ear-piercing. It's really the type of treble that a lot of reference class headphones aim for and fall quite short from. There is a lot of treble detail here. In Scherzo for X-Wings, the horns and brass had their natural timbre without harshness. They cut right through the mix without distortion. I could not hear individual instruments, but group sets were perfectly clear, separate, and smooth. One group set appeared in the right ear cup while another played in the left. The double bass was not particularly emphasized, but still easily audible. In Flight from the City by Johan Johansson, the piano sounded about 8 feet away from me. Its notes had quick decay, but there was a sense of naturalness about them as well. There was clear separation between the piano and cello. Some headphones overemphasized the bassier notes of the piano, but not the Deva. The bassy notes did not overshadow the others, and because of the quick transients, nothing melded or distorted. There is a thump sound when the pianist presses down on the keys, but that sound is not exaggerated. The Sundara has a slight roll-off in the treble compared to the Deva. The instrument tonalities are not so affected that the timbre changes. Instead, you simply get a slightly more relaxed treble presentation. Separation of instruments is not quite as good on the Sundara, however. Things sound just a bit more congested where they sounded separate on the Deva. The double bass had just a bit more presence on the Sundara than the Deva, but the two headphones were not far apart. Overall transience of the notes was just a tiny bit faster on the Deva. In Flight from the City, the piano sounded very similar in both headphones. The cello melded just a little bit on the Sundara, however. The piano sounded about 10 feet from me and had slightly longer decay than it did on the Deva. The bassier keys did not distort or overwhelm the other notes. The thump sound was very similar on both headphones. The LCD-One's dark nature continues into the treble region. Treble is significantly rolled off, and far from neutral on the LCD-One. Brass and horns are slightly off-timbre in comparison to the Deva and the Sundara. These instruments tend to meld just a little on the LCD-One, whereas they cut right through on the Deva. It is impossible to hear individual instruments on the LCD-One, but group sets are audible. However, the LCD-One's rendition of group sets is not the same as on the Deva. Whereas the Deva has clear separation of group sets, the LCD-One tends to meld them together. In Flight from the City, the LCD-One made the piano seem as if it was about 6 to 8 feet from me. The bassier keys had about the same emphasis as on the Deva, though had longer decay. The cello and piano melded on the LCD-One, but were clear and separate on the Deva. In fact, there were occasions when the LCD-One made the cello sound recessed in comparison to the piano. Neither headphone distorted the piano or cello. Of the 3 headphones, the LCD-One has the smallest Soundstage. It is about average at best. As I have said many times, the LCD-One is a dark headphone, and that character is underscored by the more intimate Soundstage. The Sundara has noticeably more Soundstage than the LCD-One. Instruments that sounded melded on the LCD-One have more air on the Sundara. The Deva hands down has the widest Soundstage of the 3. In every respect, on every track, in every genre of music, the Deva presented wider sound than either the LCD-One or the Sundara. The difference is stark between the LCD-One and the Deva, and a little less stark between the Sundara and Deva. The LCD-One sounds like listening to good speakers in your bedroom. The Sundara sounds like you're listening to good speakers in your living room. And the Deva sounds like good floor-standing speakers that are on one end of your house and you're at the other end, without walls in between. For detail retrieval, I listen to micro details and nuances in songs. I also play the song New Light by Kazuki. In New Light, I count the number of steps I can hear within the first 60 seconds of the song. The standard bearer is the Focal Clear, which presented 16 footsteps in the first 45 seconds. As I listened to various songs, it was apparent that the Deva simply has more detail than the LCD-One and Sundara. The LCD-One steamrolls over micro details because of its thicker, warmer presentation. The Sundara provides about the same type of detail as the Deva, but the Deva's noticeably larger soundstage makes some of those details stand out a little better. The creaking of the pianist bench in Flight from the City is different on the LCD-One than on the Hifiman headphones. The LCD-One makes that sound muffled. The Sundara lets you hear the creaking, but the Deva lets you hear it and the one right after it as well. This is not to say that the Deva is a detail monster. It is not. In fact, its presentation of details is nothing phenomenal. The clarity is well above average, however, and the clarity combined with the soundstage gives the appearance of more detail. As for the song New Light, I heard the following number of footsteps. On the LCD-One, I heard 6. On the Sundara, I heard 11. And on the Deva, I heard about 10. If you have followed my channel for a while, you know I'm not a fan of Bluetooth. The technology is useful and convenient, but is often falsely marketed. You simply cannot get the same type of resolution and fidelity through Bluetooth that you can through wired connection. Moreover, a big contributor to lackluster Bluetooth headphones is the lack of proper amplification. Even with LDAC connection, if your Bluetooth headphones have a wimpy amp, the drivers will not perform at their best, resulting in less than optimum sound quality over the best Bluetooth codec you have. And this is where the Blue Mini shines. It does drive the Deva, and it drives it quite well. It's not the same as proper amplification through a DAP or desktop amp like the Liquid Spark, but it's close, and it's certainly a whole lot better than any other Bluetooth headphone I've heard so far. The Blue Mini can make the Deva far too loud, take it beyond safe volumes with room to spare. If your recording is purposefully quiet, then you'll obviously not hear what I'm talking about. And if your recording has gain boost, then it'll sound louder faster on the Blue Mini. But if all things are equal, then the Blue Mini should immediately appear as a superior Bluetooth amp. I listened to the Blue Mini for several hours and switched back and forth between it and wired connection occasionally. The biggest sound difference is with the bass response. Over wired connection, the bass tended to be tighter and slightly faster. Soundstage was also just a little bit wider over wired connection than over Bluetooth. Clarity was about the same over either connection. The same is true with overall tonality. The Blue Mini, for example, did not make the Deva sound warmer or colder. There were some differences in decay and detail, but nothing that would make you want to toss the Blue Mini into the trash. In contrast, if there was a way for me to rip out the Bluetooth module on the AKG K361BT, I would. It is one of the worst applications of Bluetooth I have ever heard. With the K361, wired connection is a huge improvement over Bluetooth. I cannot say the same thing for the Deva. The Blue Mini has no distortion or noise whatsoever. I tried connection with SBC, aptX HD, AAC, and LDAC. It all performed flawlessly. Moreover, the Blue Mini is more than a one-trick pony. You can use the Blue Mini over USB in the event you misplaced the 3.5mm cable. I have only two negatives to mention about the Deva and Blue Mini combo. First, for some strange reason, the connection is simply not stable when connected to the Hibi R3 Pro and the Hibi app on the V30. Second, the Blue Mini is fitted specifically for the Deva. Without significant modification to the Blue Mini, you can't really fit it onto any other headphone. $300 for the Deva with the Blue Mini is a lot of money, but it's less than some Bluetooth headphones and still cheaper than a lot of non-Bluetooth audiophile headphones. The build quality is fine. There's nothing I can really complain about. Every Hifiman product I have used has its quirks, and the Deva is no different. The design may not be to your liking. The protruding Bluetooth module isn't fashionable, and the overall size of the headphones may be too awkward. Aesthetics aside, however, the Deva is light, very easy to wear for long periods, and easy to drive. You do not need a dedicated DAP for this headphone. The excellent Blue Mini makes wired connection more of a strong suggestion than a requirement. There is a lot of plastic on this headphone. The ear cup housing is all plastic. The ear pads feel like sponges. There's no memory foam that I can feel. Were you to drop this headphone on concrete, you'll be picking up bits and pieces. But let's be honest, the $400 LCD one is not built like a tank either, nor is the AKG K361 or K371. The Sony WH-1000X series of headphones feel sturdy enough for being plastic, but I would not call them robust either. In my opinion, the Deva's build is pretty much on par with most Bluetooth headphones and some audiophile headphones. If you are the type to be rough with your gear, I think I'll point you to a different direction. Then there's the sound. The Deva is more or less balanced. Now, this isn't neutral. If you have ever heard the Sundara, then the Deva is not much different in the overall sound signature. But the Soundstage is where this headphone excels. It beats the LCD one without hesitation and slightly outpaces the Sundara in that regard as well. The clarity in this headphone is also impressive, particularly for the price. So that's what it comes down to. Price. You can certainly live without the Blue Mini. I think $80 extra for this device is agreeable considering what it does provide, but it is not necessary. If you already have a Bluetooth amp DAC like the Shamling UP4 or Ear Studio ES100, then you really don't need to spend the $80 on the Blue Mini. The concern is that if you do not buy the Blue Mini with the Deva, you may not be able to buy it separately. I searched online and on Hifiman's website, but there is no listing to buy just the Blue Mini. The Deva by itself is about $220, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that price point. In fact, it's quite good. It's a fair price as far as I am concerned. For that amount of money, you get a comfortable headphone with faultless sound quality, above average soundstage, and clear sound. The sound signature may not be to your liking. If you do not like the Sundara, your mind probably will not change with the Deva. Does the Deva replace the Sundara? No, I don't think so. The Sundara has much better build. Its sound signature is fairly close to that of the Deva, but for the soundstage and clarity. And you do not need to order specialty cables for the Sundara. But is that worth another $100 to you? Well, that's the real question. If you are curious about planar magnetic drivers and have wanted to try planar headphones, I think the Deva is a good place to start. It's affordable enough for most. In future videos, I will compare the Deva to other headphones, including the Beyerdynamic Amaron Wireless and the Bowers & Wilkins PX7.